A watch can tell time, a watch can signal status. But once in a great while, a watch changes how we think about design itself. The Cartier Tank Watch is one of those rare timepieces, a watch that reframed wristwatches aesthetics, helped normalize wristwear in modern culture, and became an enduring symbol of understated power. And Cartier, the Tank Watch, written by one of my favorite authors, Franco Colloni, isn't just a history of that watch, it's a story of design, a story of personality, culture, and the politics of style. Today, we're exploring how this book elevates a single model into a living legend. The author, Franco Colloni, isn't a casual commentator. He's a historian, a connoisseur, and veteran of the luxury world. He's a co-founder of the Michelangelo Foundation for Creativity and Craftsmanship, an institution dedicated to heritage and craft. Colloni has authored numerous reference works on watchmaking and jewelry, and his voice here is that of someone who sees beyond mechanisms into culture, design, and legacy. This isn't marketing, it's appreciation shaped by deep knowledge. Cartier, the Tank Watch, is a monograph, a dedicated book on a single model that has achieved widespread cultural resonance. It's approximately 230 full-color pages of narrative, design, analysis, and archival materials, illustrated with previously unpublished photographs and documents. It is organized not just around production dates, but around themes of design, influence, reinvention, and legacy. This edition was published in 2023, making it a modern, richly updated tribute covering the tank from its birth in 1917 to its most recent reinterpretations. So the story of Tank begins in 1917 in a world still scattered by the trenches of World War I. Louis Cartier, inspired by the Renault FT-17 tanks, he saw on the Western Front sketched a watch whose proportions and lines mirror the geometry of a fighting machine, robust yet elegant. That specific design choice, transforming the form of warfare into the form of the wrist, is more than metaphor. It's an early instance of design and symbolic dialogue between cultural forces, aesthetics, engineering, and modern identity. This book waves that origin into a narrative that shows how a practical form became a timeless symbol of modernism, elegance, and influence. What makes the Tank Watch readable as a tank, and what this book illustrates with depth, isn't fashion, it is geometry. The parallel brancards or sidebars, the rectangular case, the clean Romal dial, and the sapphire cabochon crown create a visual language that reads as disciplined, balanced, and unmistakable. Colloni explores how these design choices weren't accidental. They were a statement, an early synthesis of function and style, where a timepiece announced itself before it was even worn. This is where design becomes political rhetoric, a code language that signals belonging to certain circles of taste, elegance, and power. The tank didn't stop with its first model. Over more than a century, Cartier has reinterpreted the design. Tank Louis Cartier, classical proportions and refinement. And then Tank Cintré, streamlined and elongated. And then Tank Americain, softened edges with modern posture. Then Tank Français, integrated bracelet architecture and various artistic and experimental forms like the Tank Must and limited special editions. All of these are names that it makes me difficult to pronounce. Anyway, Colloni's book takes the reader through these variations not just as trivia but as narrative of adoption. how a design can remain faithful to its DNA while evolving with culture. And here's where the book fully earns its place in watches and politics. Beyond mechanics and variants, Coloni looks at who wore the tank. General John J. Pershing was gifted one of the earliest tanks, tying it to military prestige. Figures like Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and Princess Diana made the tank a symbol of power and restraint in public life, blending grace with authority. Also, artists such as Andy Warhol embraced the tank as a cultural artifact of modern life. These stories are not footnotes, they are evidence of how watches circulate meaning. When a leader or an artist adopts a tank or any watch, it becomes a signifier of identity, a signifier of taste, and of visual politics. So what does Cartier the Tank Watch do that most watch books don't? It sidesteps the usual spec-centric narrative, serial numbers, calibers, bezel types, and instead focuses on design evolution as cultural adoption. The tank's role in fashion, social identity, and cultural history. The intersection of utility and symbolic appearance. This book helps you see the tank not as a product, but as a cultural artifact, and that has influenced how the world visualizes sophistication for over a century now. For collectors, this insight is more valuable than any reference number. And here is a deeper takeaway. The tank is not just a watch, it is a visual argument. It says, elegance does not scream, it defines itself with geometry, balance, and quiet confidence. And that, my friends, is soft power. This book shows how an object so pared down in form can extract enormous cultural influence from catwalks to presidential shoulders. The tank isn't the flashiest watch. It's not the most mechanically complex, but it is one of the most legible in the semiotic sense. Its lines read like a sentence. Its proportions speak of order. Its wearers project a version of identity that's thoughtful before being flamboyant. Coloni's book helps articulate this language of a visual grammar and how it becomes a universal idiom. So in a nutshell, Cartier the Tank Watch book is a design history, a cultural biography, a chronicle of influence, and a map of aesthetic politics. But it's important what people like you say and what they like, because at the end of the day, they make icons. So what design language do you see in your own watches if you look at your collection? How much style influence identity versus function, and which other iconic watch designs do you think deserve a design narrative book like this one? I want to hear from you, so drop me a comment or send me a message, because watches don't just measure seconds, they measure meaning. And this is Watches and Politics, so don't forget to subscribe and share it with a design lover in your circle, and I can't wait to see you in the next chapter.